Hi, como va? It's Bill Jelen from Mr. Excel. It's Friday night. What are we doing here? Friday night, it's the first night of Excel weekend, and rather than going out on Friday night, you're here listening to me talk about pivot tables. I'm just amazed. Thanks for being here. Now, I've done a lot of sessions on pivot tables. Recently for the Toronto, Canada group, I did 2 hours of pivot tables, and you might have seen that. So I tried to come up with new tricks and techniques for this session today. We're going to get started off with creating your first pivot table and controlling pivot table defaults, a great feature that came along back in 2017. And I feel like I had something in that because I was the one who went out to excel.uservoice.com and tried to get Microsoft to add that in. How do you copy that pivot table for every single customer in your data? How to use a regular filter, the filter on the data tab in a pivot table. That's against the rules, but I show a great way to sneak in there, which allows us to create a better top 5 report. How to change the order of items in a pivot table. Checking the box, add this data to the data model. It unlocks a whole bunch of features in pivot tables, including distinct count and more. We'll take a look at how to do slicers for 2 pivot tables. But then the really hard one, 2 different data sets, creating 2 pivot tables and the same slicer, controlling those. And then a cool little trick just came along recently. Format one cell in a pivot table, and the formatting travels with that cell. Still can't figure out how they're doing that. All right, well, hey, let's get started. All right, well, hey, let's get started with our first pivot table. The most important thing here is to have a data set that's set up for pivot tables. That means no blank rows, no blank columns. Every column has a heading, and that heading is on a single row. We don't want to have headings on 2 or 3 rows or something like that. You can turn on wrap text and put it all in one cell if you need something like that. All right, we want to create a pivot table here, let's say with total revenue by region and product. Total revenue by region and product. We can do that in 6 clicks. Go to the Insert tab. On the Insert tab, choose Pivot Table, and it detects the edge of the data, A1 to I564. It offers to go to a new worksheet. Lots of times I'll put the pivot table out here on an existing worksheet, but today I'll let it go to a new worksheet. We'll click OK. And what we get over here on the right-hand side is the pivot table fields list. This has a list of all of the fields in the original data set and 4 drop zones down here: filters, columns, rows, and values. So if we want to create a report showing revenue, I check mark revenue because it's numeric, it goes to the values area. I'll check mark region and it'll go to the rows area. That's the area down the left-hand side. And then finally, the last thing I'll do here is I'll take the product field and drag it to the columns area. All right, now, hey, one cool little tip here. I usually don't use this version. I will use field section and area section side by side, which gives me this version here. There's more room for more columns in the left-hand side, and then the same drop zones over on the right-hand side. All right, so there's our pivot table. One frustrating thing is that the pivot table always shows up in general format. This is easier to fix now. Right-click, number format, and choose currency. Actually, I just go with numbers, turn on the thousand separator, no decimal places. And we are good to go there. Now, you print this out, give it to your manager, and your manager says, oh, no, that's not what I wanted. I want products down the side and regions across the top. And that is so easy to fix. We'll just take the region field and drag it from rows to columns. Take the product field and drag it from columns to rows, and we have a completely different report. Or the manager says, okay, within each product, can you show me the customers? So we'll take the customer field and put it inside the product area. Now, hey, look, check this out. By default, my pivot table started in what's known as tabular layout, which is great. This is the way that I like it. Each field in its own column. You'll notice the empty cells here have 0 instead of being empty. This happens thanks to the Design tab, Report Layout. Most people, they're starting out in compact form. That's where customer and product are all in the same column. I don't like this. It started back in Excel 2007 as the default. I asked Microsoft several times, year after year after year, to give us a way to change it so that we would start in tabular form, and also to turn on repeat item labels, right? So right here, this ABC is usually followed by a bunch of blank cells. That is inferring that these cells are all ABC, but at some point later, I might want to sort this data copy and paste those values, and I want that to be filled in. So report layout, repeat all item labels. And I used to make those changes to every pivot table, but I don't have to do that anymore, because if we come here and go to File and then Options, File and Options, right here on the data category, it's the third category down. It's a brand new category. There's a button for Edit Default Layout. Edit Default Layout, and in there we can say that all future pivot tables will start in tabular form. We'll always repeat all item labels, and we can even go into pivot table options and say for empty cells, show 0, right, instead of the blank that we would usually get there. Whatever things you like to change in pivot tables, like I know a lot of people will uncheck AutoFit column widths on update. I run into other people who really like the classic pivot table layout. That's where you drag the fields right into the report instead of over to the areas. You can change any of those defaults, and the next time you create a pivot table, any workbook on this computer, it will automatically be created in that form. All right, next I want to show you one of the most amazing tricks to take a pivot table and create that pivot table for every single customer. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the customer field and drag it from rows up to filters. I don't use this filters a lot. It's kind of strange. First, it lets you just choose one customer. So for example, here, let's choose Walmart. Click OK, and we see the answers from Walmart. But then if you would say select multiple items and choose a few customers, then it says multiple items. What does that mean? Like when you print this out, you'll never remember what it is. So it's better to use slicers instead of the filter over here. But I'm going to show you just an amazing trick. One of the reasons why you might want to put customer up there in the top of the pivot table. We're going to create a pivot table. Make sure to do any formatting that you need to do. If you need to go to the Design tab and turn on banded rows or any formatting that you want before you use this trick. And I want to call out the down here. My original data is on the data sheet, and I'm on sheet 2. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pivot table. I'm going to create this pivot table for every customer. It's on the Analyze tab, not the Options button. I don't want you to click the Options button. I want you to go to the little tiny drop down to the right of Options. And there's something there called Show Report Filter Pages. And it says Show All Pages of, and we'll choose Customer. Now when I click OK, it's going to create 27 new worksheets in this workbook, so it could take some time. If you had 100 customers, it might take 30 or 40 seconds. Don't panic, it's working. Click OK. All right, we just kind of wait. Wow, that was really fast. Okay, so the first customer I have is ABC Stores. There's the report for ABC. There's the report for AT&T. And look down here in the sheet tabs. The sheet tabs are named with the customer. Unless the customer has an illegal character that can't be used in the sheet tab, they'll use that name. So there's Bank United, Boeing, Citigroup, and all the way down through for all of the data, right? Just an amazing feature hiding there behind the Options button. It's not in Options. You have to open the little drop down, Show Report Filter Pages. Just a great way to take one pivot table and make that pivot table for every single customer, every single product, every single region, and so on. All right, my next trick here is to create a top 10 report. I'm going to take the product field out. I'm going to uncheck that. I'm going to take the customer field and leave it. The region field won't be going across the top anymore. So we just have customers down the left-hand side and then sum of revenue. And I'm going to take that field a few different times. What's really nice is we can change this calculation. So right here is sum of revenue. I'll go to the second one, sum of revenue. I'll double-click the heading. Double-clicking the heading is a great way to open the value field settings. And you see that they have 11 functions here, sum, count, average, max, min. Those aren't the ones I want. The good ones are on the second tab, the Show Values As tab. And I'll say I want to change this to be a percentage of the column total. So we'll change it to percentage of total, like that. Click OK, and now for each customer we get to see what their percentage of the total is. In my case, Walmart is 12.96% of the total. Over here, let's do another one. We can do Show Values As, and they have two rank options, largest to smallest or smallest to largest. Click OK, and so we can see each customer, like there's Walmart is number 1. Number 2 is General Motors, number 3, Exxon, and so on. If you forget to change the heading, like I just did, you can just come here and type a new heading like that. You're allowed to type anything. And even here, if I want to call that total revenue, I'm allowed to call that total revenue. But what I really want to call it is revenue. But unfortunately, that does not work because I already have a field called revenue, and they're going to say we already have a field with that name. But great little trick here. Either before revenue or after, just type a space like that, and that makes the field name different enough that they will accept it. All right, so now I have this report here, and in my fake data, it's just 26 rows. It all fits on one page. But in real life, I used to create this report. It would be 20 pages every month. We would have a few big customers and then a whole bunch of little customers who were just buying spare parts from us. So my manager wanted to see the total, right? And before I do this, I want you to just remember these numbers. Our largest customer is Walmart at 13% of $6.7 million. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to the customer dropdown and say value filters, top 10, and I'm going to ask for the top 5. Maybe you want 20, or maybe you want 10 or 5. You can choose any number, and it can even be the bottom if you want to see the lowest performing customers. So the top 5 items, by the way, you can do top 80% or give me enough records to get to $5 million. Top 5 items based on revenue, click OK. All right, and there it is. There's our top 5 customers, ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's beautiful. But here's the problem. Remember that Walmart was 12.96% of the total, and now, suddenly, they're 24% of this smaller total, 3.5. And my vice president of sales is going to be upset with that number because he thinks he did $6 to $7 million, and this is showing only half of that. Right, and the problem is this grand total here isn't the total of everything. It's the total of just the things we're seeing. Of course, Excel has a tool to turn this on. If we come to the Design tab and go to Subtotals, right to here, the 4th item, called Include Filtered Items in Totals. If we choose that, it would solve the problem. The grand total will go back to 6.7 million, and Walmart would be 12.96% of that total. But you'll notice that it's grayed out. I remember the day this got grayed out. It was January 30th of 2007. Every day I open Excel, I create a pivot table, I come in here and see if that is no longer grayed out. I'm sure the person who was going to fix this, was going to put this back in, has probably left the Excel team. They're probably working on Word or PowerPoint or something like that. All right, so unfortunately we can't use that to solve our problem, but here is a great trick. I was doing a seminar in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania many years ago. A guy named Dan from Philadelphia was there, and he said, hey, you can create that report that you want with the right total at the bottom. The whole trick is you have to use not the new filters, not the filters in this dropdown, but the old filters on the data tab, the old school filters, these ones here that are grayed out. He says, yeah, but there's a trick. There's a trick that you can use this filter in a pivot table. And let's just go back and look at the original data for a quick second. Usually when I want to turn on the filters, I choose any one cell in the data and turn on the filter. Some people use Control-Shift-L or Control-T. Some people select the whole data set with Control-*. But Dan in Philadelphia had a better way to do this. He said, all we have to do is choose the cell to the right of the last heading. So in this case, profit in I1 is the last heading. I can choose J1. And in fact, you can choose any of these cells over here on the right-hand side, but I always use this one up here. And for some weird reason, I don't know why, from that cell, I can click the filter, and it turns on the drop-downs in the adjacent columns. It doesn't turn on the drop-down in J1, but it turns on all the other columns. Now, this in and of itself isn't a good trick. You're like, no one would care about this trick because there's plenty of other good ways to turn the filters on. But let's come back here to our pivot table and take a look at how that's grayed out, right? There's someone at Microsoft on the Excel team who's in charge of graying this out. If I would click out here into the nothingness, then I'm more than welcome to filter. But as soon as I click inside the pivot table, they disable the filter. So here I can use it, here I can't. I haven't met this person. I don't know who actually wrote this code, but the interesting thing is they've never met Dan in Philadelphia. All right, so take a look at the data, go to the last heading, go one cell to the right, to the magic cell, and by all rights, they should have grayed out the filter, but they don't know the trick. So right here, I'm about to apply a filter for the first time to a pivot table. This is completely against the rules. I'm going to get a drop down here in B3 and C3 and D3. So I'll choose filter. There we go. All right. What is this good for? Well, it's good for solving my top 10 problem, but it's also good if you wanted to say, maybe we had items going across, products going across, and we wanted to see the top 10 customers for the second product or the third product. Well, now you can use that drop down for the top 10. But here I'm going to use this drop down, revenue, number filters, top 10, and I'm going to say the top 5. No. I want the top 5, but I'm going to ask for the top 6. This old school filter doesn't realize that grand total at the bottom is special, and the grand total is the largest item. So I choose top 5. My grand total comes back to the correct number, 6.7 million. 12.96% is our largest customer instead of 24. All right. So you can auto filter a pivot table. No one knows this, but if you go to the magic cell, then that will work. All right, so here's just a few cool, fun tricks with controlling the sequence of how things appear in the pivot table. So I'm going to do insert, pivot table, OK. And I'm going to check mark product to go down the side and revenue. And you'll notice that the products over here appeared in alphabetical sequence, A, B, C, D, E, F, X, Y, Z. And that's the way that you would expect them to appear. But instead of product, if I would put region down the side, it appears east, central, west, which is not how you would expect it to be. You would expect central to be first, and then east, and then west. And how am I controlling this? I'm controlling this because I've set up a custom list. Actually, I've set up several custom lists, and custom lists are great for filling data. Like I have a list of names, and I can fill those very quickly, and a list of products. And I use this for creating fake data all the time. But this east, central, west list, I'm not using that to create fake data. I'm using that because I want my pivot table to appear with east first and then central and then west. The company that I used to work for, that was how they reported it. The company was in the east, so east was always first and then the central region and then west. That was just the company standard. All right, and every time I created a pivot table, I wanted it to appear in that sequence. So here's what you do. You type your list in the order that you want it to appear, east, central, west, select the list, and then go into Excel options. File, options, go to advanced. The advanced is a very long category. Scroll all the way down to the bottom where there's a button there for edit custom lists. And then from here, if you've already selected your data, D3 to D5, you can just simply click import because it's already in that list. But you'll see I already have a list of east, central, west. And by default, when we create a pivot table, the pivot table is going to follow the list, right? So if I would happen to have months, January, February, March, if I would happen to have months, January, February, March, it'll fall in that order, or any of my custom lists. If I would have employee names, Andy, Barb, Chris, Diane, Ed. Now, what if I have some employees who are in the list, maybe Ed and Jared, and then other people that aren't in the list? Well, the people who are in the list will appear first, and then after that, everybody alphabetically, right? So it's an awesome little trick. You set it up once, and then it should work for every pivot table that you create. Now, you can override this under pivot table options. On totals and filters, you can uncheck use custom lists when sorting, but that's turned on by default. All right, now here's another fun way that we can reorder things. I'm going to take the product field and move that to go across the columns. And of course, we have A, B, C, D, E, F, and X, Y, Z. You'll notice that X, Y, Z is the smallest with just over $2 million. So I'll right click here, number format, add that comma back in, the thousand separator. All right, so you see that XYZ is the smallest with $2 million. What if I wanted XYZ to be first, followed by ABC, followed by DEF? This is absolutely amazing that this would work. And of course, you would never do this in regular Excel. But if I come here and I type in column B, XYZ, and then when I press enter, they're going to take the data that belongs to XYZ and move it to column B. It's unbelievable. Wow, that's crazy. Who would have ever thought that would have worked? You can also do it by selecting the cell and going right there to get that four-headed arrow and then dragging it to a new location like that. So very easy to reorder data in a pivot table, but of course, this is a one-time thing, and by setting up a custom list, you can control the sequence of those. All right, let's talk about getting account distinct. Account distinct. And what I want to know is I want to know how many customers there are in each sector. So if I just try this with a regular pivot table, insert pivot table, okay, we'll put sector and customer down the left-hand side. And I can just look at this. Communications has 3 customers. Energy has 2 customers. Financial has 4 customers. But when I try and count, if I take the customer field and drag it over to the values area, it says that it's a count of customer, but it's not. That's the number of invoices that customer had. For example, like healthcare here, if I double click that to drill down, it's all the same customer. Merck is the customer, and they happen to have 4 invoice records, right? So it's not correct at all when it says count of customer. But there is an easy way to get a count of customer. What we're going to do is we're going to go insert pivot table, but one huge difference, this box that came along in Excel 2013, add this data to the data model. That box should say, give my pivot table superpowers. Click OK. I'm going to build the same wrong report with sector down the left-hand side and customer in the values area. Same wrong answers that I got before, but here's the difference. When I double-click on the customer heading, I have these same choices, sum, count, average, max, min, that you have in a regular pivot table, but scroll all the way down to the bottom. And at the bottom, there's an option there for distinct count. When I choose distinct count, then I actually get 3 customers in communications, 2 in energy, 4 in financial, 1 in healthcare, and those numbers are correct. Now, the other thing that we get from add this data to the data model is the ability to join 2 tables together. But one more thing that we have, let's just quickly change this report out. I'll get rid of customer and sector, put customer down the left-hand side, put revenue in the values area twice, like that. First one I'll leave as revenue. The second one I'll change to show values as a percentage of the column total. And just to check down here, Walmart is our largest customer with 12.96% of the 6.7 million. Same answers we had before, but here's the beautiful thing. If I go to top 10 and ask for the top 5, click OK. All right. It works. 12.96% of the total, and the grand total has the little asterisk there, the 6.7 million. Now, that's because when I add this data to the data model, here in the subtotals, that choice, include filtered items and totals, which has been grayed out for more than 14 years now, becomes enabled. Choosing the data model is a quick way to get that. Now, it's already chosen because I have it selected in the pivot table defaults. Remember, File, Options, Data, Edit Default Layout. I checked the box for include filtered items and totals. I did that in desperation to see if it would work with a regular pivot table. With a regular pivot table, having this box checked doesn't do anything. But with a data model pivot table, it does. You know, there's more things that are grayed out in regular pivot tables. Here under Pivot Table Analyze, OLAP Tools, Convert to Formulas. That won't work on a regular pivot table, but it will work in a data model pivot table. Next, I want to talk about slicers in pivot tables. Slicers are awesome, but I have a pivot table here with 2 different fields, revenue and profit. I want commas in all of these. Rather than use number format, select all of the data, including the grand total, and then go to the Home tab and choose your number format there. Number, 1000 separator, no decimal places. Even if you had 100 fields going across, you could change the number format in all of them at once. This never used to work. Somewhere back around 2016 or so, they made this change. You have to include the grand totals in your selection or it will not work. All right, so slicers came along in Excel 2010. Timelines came along in 2013. They're beautiful. They work great. I can choose a sector, for example, manufacturing, and I get just the manufacturing customers. There's the retail customers. There's the financial customers. You can even choose on multi-select and choose multiple options here and see what they are. Much better than having these items up in the filter field where you get the multiple items when you choose multiple items. But the big question is, how do I get this set of slicers to work on two different data sets? Well, look, the hard way to do it is to create the other pivot table and then connect them using report connections. But there's a fast way. Take your first pivot table, copy it, Control C, and come over here and paste. And now they're both going to be reacting to those slicers. Take the second one, and you can change it. Maybe instead of customers, we want to have region and product along the left-hand side. And we want to see cost of goods sold in here as well. And you'll see that these now change in reaction to both pivot tables are changing in reaction to the same set of slicers. This isn't how most people do it with a copy and paste. Instead, they create a second pivot table, and then from that pivot table, either go to Filter Connections and choose which slicer, or choose the slicer, and then go to Report Connections and choose which pivot tables you want to hook it up in. You don't have to do any of that with just a simple copy and paste. One slicer controlling two pivot tables, that's easy when they come from the same data set. But here I have two pivot tables that are coming from completely different data sets. I have data here by city. I have data here by state. Now they have state in common, but I need one slicer to control them both. Now both of these pivot tables are created using the data model. So insert pivot table, add this data to the data model. Same thing here, insert pivot table, add this data to the data model. On the Power Pivot tab, we're going to manage and go into diagram view and create relationships. We can't create a relationship directly from table city to table GDP, but we can stop at an intermediate table. Check this out. A little table that I built over here in column A, just with the field in common, right? So manage, look at the diagram view, draw a relationship from here to here, and from here to here, all right? And then we're gonna build our slicer based on this little table. So we come out, here, insert, slicer, and go to the data model. We have three tables in the workbook data model. I'll choose open. Choose the states from the slicer, not from table city or from table GDP. Click OK. All right, now customize this a little bit here, maybe 3 columns, make it a little bit wider, color it. All right, but before this can work, we have to go to Report Connections and say this is tied to this pivot table and this pivot table. Click OK. All right, that was super easy. Check it out. If I now choose one state, both pivot tables are going to update even though they're coming from different data sets. Here, we'll change this out, add city in. So now we have many cities, but they're cities that are tied to that state. Great way to solve that problem. All right, let's finish up with one amazing little trick that just came around recently. If I have a manager who's in charge of product XYZ and he's in charge of the West, right click and I'm going to format that cell and we'll just choose some sort of fill here. Click OK, right? And as that cell moves, that formatting is going to move with it. So if I would put product down the side, you see that the formatting changed. If I would add something else, then anything for West XYZ, all of those, West XYZ, all of those customers will continue to be formatted. That stays there as long as region and product are in the pivot table. If I would remove product from the pivot table and then put it back, too bad, it has forgotten, right? So it's only there as long as those fields remain.